worship leaders should be spending more time looking into the faces of their people than in the planning center or into Ableton Live.
Podcast today, we are talking with Matt McCoy, president of CCLI and a founder, product innovator, and worship leader best known for creating Loop Community. Now serves more than 100,000 churches globally. Over the past 2 decades, he has trained thousands of musicians. He is also the inventor of the Looptimus foot controller. Matt has served as president of WorshipTools and SundaySounds.com.
All of a sudden now all these churches just started sounding like the recording. And we can talk maybe a little bit later about whether that's a good or bad thing. Now I'm starting to see a major shift back to that is the future of the church. And we need to be pouring into people.
How would you recommend churches utilize tracks as a tool, but not become dependent on them to the point where we get lazy and we neglect the people on our team?
Nothing is more discouraging than that. And that happens at churches every single Sunday. Most of the time I find that it's actually just not intentional. And that is the problem, is that worship leaders show up with their, and that's also why a lot of rehearsals end up being like total disasters. Again, it's kind of going back to this idea, and I think it's really important to train your sound team on this. And that's how you get a cohesive mix.
How did your philosophy of worship influence the tech that you started to build?
One way to really up relationship and also like volunteer commitment and not burnout is to, when all of that stuff starts happening, the focus starts to be around that on a Sunday morning. Our goal is to make all of our products like very simple so that you don't have to think about it. And this is the philosophy so that you can focus on it. Is majorly overkill for what a church and a worship team needs. Like, are you spending more time looking at Ableton Live than you are looking into like the face of your bass player?
If a church has not implemented tracks in any capacity, what would you recommend as a first step?
So where I would start is, that's the number one thing you can do, by the way, to raise the quality of your band.
Welcome to the Creative Tides podcast, where expert insights flows into everyday creative spaces. We bring you conversations with leaders, innovators, and artists, making high-level ideas accessible and practical for your local context. Discover more episodes and upcoming events at www.creative-tides.com. We're glad you're here. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the Creative Tides podcast today. We are talking with Matt McCoy. Matt is the president of CCLI and a founder, product innovator, and worship leader best known for creating loopcommunity.com, a music technology company providing multitracks, software, and hardware for church musicians and live performance. Founded in 2009, Loop Community now serves more than 100,000 churches globally and is a leading marketplace in Christian music for musicians to sell and discover multitracks. He's a lifelong worship leader and pastor's kid, and pioneered the use of tracks in church worship in 2002. Over the past 2 decades, he has trained thousands of musicians to run tracks and playback and live performance. He is also the inventor of widely adopted tools, including the Looptimus foot controller, which I use and love, Track Rig audio interface, and the Prime Multitrack app, making professional worship technology accessible and intuitive for churches of all sizes. In addition to leading Loop Community, Matt has served as president of WorshipTools.com and SundaySounds.com, where he oversees teams building simple, powerful, and affordable technology for churches and worship teams.
Based in Chicago, Matt is a worship leader and songwriter, passionate about equipping churches with the tools and technology they need for impactful worship. Thanks for being with us, Matt.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk with you and hear a little bit more about your journey and all of your innovations. For people who maybe aren't familiar with Loop Community, I mean, it's a pretty popular, well-known thing in the church world, but just give us a synopsis of what it is and what you do with Loop Community.
Yeah, Loop Community is a website where churches can go to and search for a song that they're playing for a Sunday morning. And then we provide them, they can download the actual tracks for that song. And what I mean by tracks is you can get the individual audio file for the drums, or for the bass, or for the electric guitar, or acoustic guitar, or vocal parts. And we deliver those tracks as individual audio files. And then what churches are doing is they're using those audio files to help fill in and fill out their worship sound as they're playing. So if they have a full band on stage, if you go to hear a band and you hear an instrument that you don't see being played on stage, often they're using a track. And this happens everywhere. I mean, it happens in non-Christian music as well. You go to see Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber, whatever, Coldplay, they're all using tracks. But a lot of churches are using them, backing tracks, because it just helps to fill out the sound and replace for maybe where a church might be missing a musician. A lot of churches might be lacking a bass player or a piano player, and the tracks allow them to have those missing parts to fill
Yeah.
out the sound.
Yeah. So take me back to 2002 when you came up with this concept, and we're obviously seeing a need in the church. What was that need, and what led you to creating Loop Community to fill that need?
Yeah. So I grew up as a pastor's kid. My dad was a pastor of a vineyard church, and we were a small church. I mean, a couple hundred people. We didn't have any budget. We barely had musicians. We did have musicians, but we didn't have a ton of them. And it was a real challenge, because I remember tracks weren't even a thing at that time. And so I remember it just being a real challenge of trying to find new musicians, to audition them, get them in, make sure they show up, all sorts of things. And I remember I was on staff at a church called the Vineyard in Cincinnati, and I walked in to the auditorium. It was like one of my first weeks there on staff. And there was a guy up on stage leading worship. His name's Robbie. And he was leading worship, and he had a computer down at his feet, and he was triggering like these beats with a computer. And he was doing this song called Enough, the Chris Tomlin Enough song. And there was like a drum beat that started like, and then all of a sudden the band clicked off and played on top of this like electronic drum beat. And I remember standing back there and being like, wow, my mind has just been blown, because I've just seen two of my favorite things happen. I love leading worship, and I love technology. And I saw the two happen at the same time. I've never seen a worship leader use a computer at the same time as his acoustic guitar. And so when I saw Robbie somehow use a computer and acoustic guitar together, I was hooked. And I was like, I have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I started diving into this world of how do you use electronic music and backing tracks with a live real band. And that took me down a journey of really trying to figure out, okay, well, where are these tracks being made? At that time, I could probably count on two hands how many people in America. This is crazy to say, like, honestly, we're using tracks, because now, I mean, there's thousands and tens of thousands of worship leaders that are using tracks.
Yeah.
Back then, though, literally, you could probably count on two hands the number of worship leaders using tracks. And the way they were doing it was literally like loading an MP3 file onto an MP3 player, like an iPod, and they were plugging in an iPod into their sound system, and the MP3 file would be for a song, and it would be panned. So on the left-hand side of the audio would be like a click, and on the right-hand side of the audio file, there would be a track or a drum beat. Usually it was just like a with a shaker or something and a tambourine. And that was it. They weren't at all like what tracks are now.
Yeah.
And that's how they were running them. And you'd literally press play and just like hang on for the ride. Like hopefully you would stay on the track. Hopefully the band wouldn't get off. If you did, you'd have to just stop the iPod and keep doing the song. Hope that no one noticed. And these worship leaders who were doing this were like making their own using things like Fruity Loops or Reason or maybe GarageBand. I don't even know if GarageBand was like fully out then. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But they were making their own using this, just different music software, exporting it, and then uploading it to an iPod. Now here's where it got interesting. And this is where I thought, okay, there's a need for this. There was a band, I don't know if you remember, do you remember David Crowder Band?
Yes.
So there's Crowder now, which like all the young worship leaders now like know Crowder.
Yeah.
But like for those of us who go way back,
Yeah.
there was once like David Crowder Band, which was awesome. But they had an album that had like Oh Praise Him on it. And I think it was called Illuminate. And David Crowder Band were like pioneers in really figuring out how to implement electronic music in with worship music. They were like the first to do it.
Yeah.
And what they did is they created an interactive CD where when you bought the Illuminate CD, you could put it into your computer. I'm like really dating myself now because we're talking about CDs. You could put it in your computer and it would play the music, but also it had files on it, and they put on there all of their Reason files, like with the electronic tracks that you could use. And so worship leaders who were really into this were just totally geeking out over it, taking those files, throwing them onto iPods, or loading them into Ableton Live. I think Ableton Live was on like version 2 at the time. Ableton, we could talk about that, but like Ableton was not even built for worship. Ableton is like built for DJs and electronic musicians and clubs. And it was never intended for worship. And so that's a whole other story that we can talk about. But Ableton, when they found out that like worship leaders like us were using Ableton for worship, they were like, what? Like, what is this? Explain this to us. But anyways, people were uploading, the drummer from David Crowder Band had a forum called BWAC's Forum. His nickname was BWAC. I don't know why, but that was his nickname. And he had a forum. All of this sounds so old because like there was a day when like people were on forums a lot on the internet.
I'm even trying to remember like in 2002 what iPod was out. Like those would have been brand new too.
They would have been brand new. I mean, honestly, we maybe weren't even using iPods. We were using like Rio shuffles or something. I don't even know what was, just some sort of like MP3 player. But David Crowder, his drummer had this forum where he would like geek out, and he would just post stuff about like how to use Reason, and hey, here's a new like track I made for whatever song. Here's our king. And people would geek out in there, and they would download them and share them. And then like maybe like I would create something, or another worship leader would create something, and we'd upload it to it and just share it. And anyways, the problem was that it ended up not working out long term because the publishers of the songs were like, hey, this is kind of like illegal file sharing. Like this isn't legit. It was the Wild West of, of the track world. There were no places at that time to go and buy tracks. In today's world, there's like a lot of websites where you can go and buy tracks. It was not the case. At that time, people were creating their own, or they were sharing them just like over these web forums. And so fast forward a couple of years, and I'm on staff at a church in Chicago, Willow Creek. I'm on staff there as a worship leader, and I'm up late one night, totally procrastinated. I needed a track for Mighty to Save, like the biggest song in the world at the time. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm making this track for Mighty to Save using Reason. And I thought, this is so crazy. This is the most popular song in the world right now. Somebody else in the world has probably already made one for this. There should be a website where I can go and just search for Mighty to Save and download a track that somebody else has made. Or a place where I could go and upload tracks that I've made and share them. And then literally that night is when I started Loop Community. And that's why it's called Loop Community, because at the time, in that era, everyone called them loops. So today, people call them tracks. Hey, are you running tracks this weekend? Back then, no one ever used the word tracks.
Yeah, I remember.
It's honestly hard to believe. But back then, everybody said, hey, are you running loops? That was the word. And again, young worship leaders today would have no idea that that is the case. But tracks wasn't even in the vocabulary of a worship leader at that point. Hey, are you running loops? And that meant, didn't even mean tracks. Because even at that point, people weren't running stems. At that point, it literally just meant you were running an audio file with a click on it. And the band was going to play along with it and hopefully stay on time. And so it's called Loop Community for Loop. And then it's Community because I wanted it to be a place where worship leaders could go and share the loops they were creating. And so that's really the heartbeat behind Loop Community. That was a long answer, but that's the kind of the history and the story behind of how Loop Community started.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you mentioned the publishers of the artists, the original recording artists of the worship songs. So were you then reaching out to publishers of, people like David Crowder, Chris Tomlin, like to get, I don't know, the rights to their songs? Or how did you then bridge to now you have stem tracks for pretty much any worship song you could want today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So immediately when we started the website, we started getting licensing. So for the song, so any song we were selling, we were then going directly to the publisher to get permission to sell those songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that, developed great relationships with all the music publishers. At that point, though, in the beginning, we weren't selling original tracks. Like, we weren't selling original masters, as they'd be called now. Were community tracks, which are tracks that are made by another worship leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so those only required a publishing license. Eventually, I can't remember what year it was, but we started getting into also selling the original master tracks, like from the record label. So if you want the original tracks from, Phil Wickham's album, This Is Amazing Grace, you could get those. That's also around the time when worship leaders started using stems. And what I mean by that is wanting actual real instruments. And by the way, this is changing. Right now, this is actually changing back. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But if you go back and listen to what loops or tracks sounded like in the early 2000s, it was not what they sound like right now. What I mean by that is what they sounded like were very electronic. The instruments in them were just like drum loops, like and a shaker, and maybe like arpeggiator stuff and synths, maybe a tambourine, maybe some like fake strings. It was all electronic sounding, all of it. That's how it all started. And then slowly it started shifting to being like, oh, now there's a real acoustic guitar track in there. Or now there's an electric guitar track in there. Or a bass, there's actually like a real bass guitar. Or here's a real live drum kit in there. And it started shifting to kind of what you hear a lot right now, or at least the past 5 years, which are full band live tracks. And that's when we started at Loop Community getting into the master tracks. So we'd sell the original track from, Chris Tomlin's album. And when you got that, you got the drums, you got the bass, the electric guitar, the keys, everything. But it wasn't electronic sounding. It sounded like the original recording. What's interesting about that is all of a sudden now all these churches just started sounding like the recording. And we can talk maybe a little bit later about whether that's a good or bad thing. But that is what happened. Literally, it went from like bands fully sounding like however they want to sound at their church, to then in the early 2000s to them sounding however they want to sound, but adding in a new creative element of electronic music to it. So still really creative. To then moving from that to let's just sound exactly like the recording.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to see a major shift back to let's just sound how we want to sound.
Yeah. Yeah. If you could speak more on that, like as it changes back, like, are you seeing less engagement with tracks, and what's kind of the philosophy behind where worship is headed, I guess?
Well, there's a lot more people talking now about not, like a track that maybe was recorded in an arena with 10,000 people doesn't necessarily translate the same to a church of 100 people meeting in a middle school auditorium.
Yeah. With a mobile gymnasium every Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah. But in this period right here that I was talking about, churches who are literally setting up in like a high school cafeteria were running tracks that were recorded in an arena. And they're trying to sound and feel like they want to sound like that band who played this song in an arena. And there is a lot more talk now, I think, about, hey, what is actually like our church's sound?
Yeah.
Also, why are we doing this? Like, what are we trying to sound like? This is a lot of pressure. We're never going to be able to sound exactly like that. So why are we even trying?
Yeah.
Also, is that what it's even about? Also, those types of tracks incentivize worship leaders to replace real people. And I think what churches are starting to see is that, okay, you're hollowing out your own like volunteer base. You're removing all of these roles that people could actually be serving and actively engaged in your church. People are realizing that, like, okay, a church is built on like the people that are there, and you have to get them involved. That's how people like really change. That's how people, if they feel like they're a part of a community, if they feel like they're loved, they feel like they're being used, they can use their gifts. That, yeah, it's not going to sound like perfect, but it doesn't need to sound perfect.
Yeah.
Like, what's really more important? What's more important is the people over the music.
Yeah.
And so I think churches are starting to realize, okay, you know what? Maybe, yeah, we should sacrifice some quality for people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think you have to sacrifice all quality. You can have quality, but it's like, I think if there's a battle between the two, like people versus quality, people should always win. Always. And that's what excites me, is that I think that that's where the future sound of the church is going.
Yeah.
Is that it's going to get back to the people. And what does your church sound like? Stop trying to replicate and just sound like somebody else who had like tons of money to produce an amazing album that's incredible, that's blessing people. But I don't think they even ever expected you to try to like do that in your school auditorium.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think they even expected that. They just want to bless you with these songs that they've written and they've recorded. And now you take that song and make your own creative expression of it and do that at your church and get your people involved to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have a bass player? Find the 12-year-old kid that's sitting around that has an interest in music and teach him how to play bass. Don't just lean on using a bass track.
Yeah.
That's the easy way. The easy way is just like, oh, you know, we don't have a bass player, so we're just going to like use a bass track and it's going to always be perfect.
Right.
But is that really like kingdom minded?
Right.
You know, like the only reason I do what I do today is because somebody identified me as like a 13-year-old kid sitting with an acoustic guitar, and they were like, hey, like we should start like a youth worship band. And like they spent hours just pouring into me and a couple of other kids in our youth group building a youth worship band. That is the future of the church, and we need to be pouring into people. So I'm really passionate about that, and I'm glad that it's moving now back to, let's just use tracks as a supplement, not a replacement.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask, my next question was going to be, how do we utilize tracks as a tool and a resource, but we aren't like becoming lazy in our playing because we can just lean on the track? Because I've heard a lot of most churches use tracks, and I've known churches where they'll still pump in the track underneath the live player. And I think for the musician who has taken the time to learn those parts, that can feel like, am I wasting my time if you're just going to pump in this pre-recorded by a professional musician? Because that's what all of these worship bands are. You know, they're touring, they're playing together all the time, they're professionals. Is that a waste of the individual volunteer musician's time if you're going to pump in the track? I've also heard it, you know, maybe you have a student that's learning bass and they're not confident, but the only way they're going to get confident is by experience. So giving a track as a support could be a confidence booster for them. So how would you recommend churches utilize tracks as a tool, but not become dependent on them to the point where we get lazy and we neglect the people on our team?
Totally. Nothing is more discouraging to a worship team member. Imagine being a piano player and like your worship leader gave you the chart, they gave you the music to practice all week long, the key, and the piano player is at home like practicing their parts. And then they get to church and they do sound check and they're playing their piano part, but they hear another piano part playing the exact same thing. And actually it's, oh, that's the original. The original piano part is playing, and it's playing it perfect, way better than I am doing it. Nothing is more discouraging to your piano player than that. And that happens at churches every single Sunday. And I've experienced that. Like I've literally, and I've actually been the offender in that. Like I've been the worship leader preparing the tracks and then show up. And I've had even a band member ask like, hey, like the electric lead guitar track is up. It can be discouraging. So I think here's a couple things. One, to avoid that scenario, what I just described, what I found is that often it's not intentional. If it is intentional, then that's a whole other problem. Like
Sure.
if you're trying to like give your piano player a subtle message or something,
Very
that's a
passive.
very passive aggressive way
Yeah.
to do it. And that's a whole other issue. We should talk about that separately. Not a great way to handle that type of coaching. But most of the time I find that it's actually just not intentional. And that is the problem, is that worship leaders show up with their track app or whatever and their set list and all their tracks, and they literally just plug it in and go. And they never spent any time actually thinking about, what instruments do I have in my band? What parts are they playing? And then go through song by song and turn down the instruments you don't need. That's what's amazing about tracks these days. I mean, back in the iPod days, there was none of that. Today, there's apps that like make it so easy to just turn down the synth part or turn down the electric guitar part or turn down the piano part.
Yeah.
So you have to think about and plan a little bit more of, okay, who's in my band? What are they going to play? And then mute those instruments in the tracks. You have to think about it that way. You have to think of your computer or your track iPad as another instrument in the band, which means you have to treat them similarly in that you need to give them thought. You need to also sound check it. People plug in their tracks all the time and never sound check it. And that's also why a lot of rehearsals end up being like total disasters, because they kind of like forget about doing the tracks, and then no one can hear the click and people don't know where they are.
Yeah.
Do a proper sound check of the tracks. That's also another reason why a lot of churches, when you go and you see, I visit a lot of churches, and very often I always look on stage and I always see like the track computer or the iPad, and I can't hear the tracks at all. They're not even in the mix. And I'm like, this is so funny because, and the problem almost all the time is that the tracks weren't sound checked. And so the person running the sound doesn't even know the tracks are there. Like, doesn't even know what to be listening for. Doesn't even know that maybe that is actually another instrument in the band that the congregation should be hearing.
Right. Which can be a huge problem if the live band is adapting their parts around those tracks and you're not hearing those tracks in the room, then what the band is playing is going to sound maybe a little empty, or maybe they're playing like a counter melody or something that sounds out of place if you're not hearing the full context of what the band is hearing.
Totally. And if the band can't hear the tracks properly, the drummer might be playing a groove that's totally conflicting with whatever's happening in the tracks.
Yeah.
So you have to sound check the tracks. Everybody in the band needs to be able to hear the tracks. The sound team needs a chance to be able to mix the tracks, to know what they sound like, how they fit with the band. That's important. So you have to just intentionality. Think about the parts, turn down the ones you don't need, and then sound check them. The other way that tracks can really be used to help your team, and you touched on this, is rehearsal.
Yeah.
Tracks are an incredible tool for a musician trying to learn a part, and they can solo it out and hear it. And we actually just released a new product on Loop Community called Rehearse, and it works across CCLI, Loop Community, and WorshipTools. And it's basically a rehearsal player that your musician can pull up, click on a song like Holy Forever, and go to the chorus and just listen to specifically the piano part.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to hear in the mix what you're supposed to play.
And they can loop the section, they can change the key, and it just is a great rehearsal tool that they can use Monday through Friday to come prepared on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would love to circle back to the sound conversation. I don't know if you're a front of house guy, but I think another challenge with using instrument tracks in the mix with your live band is all of the tracks have been mixed and mastered. And so those are pumping in. You don't have any like control over, I mean, you could add stuff to it, but that's not going to really help, like EQ and compression and all that. So those are already mixed and mastered. And now you're adding that in with a live band of volunteers, again, who aren't professionals. How do you strike a good balance in your mix when you have to blend those two worlds?
Yeah.
Before we jump back into today's conversation, we just want to say that we're so glad that you're here with us. And today's conversation is sponsored by us, Creative Tides, and by you. This show exists to bring expertise locally, real voices, real insights, and practical wisdom into your local creative context. As a nonprofit, everything that Creative Tides does is made possible by people who believe in that mission. If this podcast has served you, one way that you can support is by going online and making a one-time or recurring donation, or by purchasing something from our merch shop. As a thank you for being with us, we would love to offer you 10% off the merch of your choice. Head to creative-tides.com/merch and use code podcast at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Every contribution helps us to keep hosting conversations, offering resources, and bringing that wisdom closer to home for you. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos, resources, or events. And thank you for being part of this work with us. Now let's get back to the conversation.
The best way, and again, this wasn't possible back in the iPod days, because in the iPod days, you plug it in, it's one mix of the track, and it's just up or down, everything up or down.
Mm-hmm.
What's amazing now is that with software, you can use interfaces, and Loop Community actually has one. We have a 8-channel XLR interface. I wish I had one here to show you, but it's just an 8-channel XLR interface. And what it does is you plug it into your track software, and you can send the different instruments out of their own individual outputs.
Mm-hmm.
And what this does is it lets your sound team individually mix the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of all the tracks up or all the tracks down, they could turn the tambourine up if it needs to be, or turn it down, usually down, or turn up the synth part, or turn up the synth bass part. Or what also, other than just volume control, it lets your sound team actually EQ the individual parts.
So that is possible.
So again, it's kind of going back to this idea, and I think it's really important to train your sound team on this, that the tracks are another musician in your band.
Yeah.
And actually, if you're using like multiple outputs, like I just described, your track computer is actually acting as probably 10 musicians in your band. That should all be mixed and EQ'd like you would 10 other real people.
Yeah.
And that's how, to answer your question, you get a cohesive mix, is that you sound check all the 5 people in your band, but then you also sound check your 6 or 7 tracks, however many tracks you're running.
Yeah.
And then everything's being mixed together so that it sounds cohesive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I'd love to go back and ask you, so you are a worship leader, and it sounds like you'd been doing worship leading for a long time before developing Loop Community. I think sometimes in the church world, there can be this, unfortunately, this separation between tech team and musicians. And I think that's something that more and more we're trying to bridge the gap, at least I am in our church context, of you are all the same team, like the tech interacts with the music and vice versa. For you, coming from a worship leader background, how did your philosophy of worship influence the tech that you started to build?
Good question. That's not where I thought you were going with that question. I was going to just say one thing about tech and the worship team.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the tech that we've built.
For sure.
The relationship between the tech team and the worship team is so important. And if they're not talking, things really start to break down. If they don't know each other's names, things start to break down. If you're shouting to the back of the room and you're just like, hey, this is too loud, that comes across a lot different than saying, hey, Bill, would you be able to help turn down this buzzing noise that's happening? That is a very major difference. And there's a lot of tension that can build up by just this shouting back and forth from across the room that happens. So there has to be relationship.
Yes.
One of the best ways I've ever seen that happen was a church that I was on staff at, where before rehearsal even started on a Saturday night, they catered in, the church wasn't cheap about this. They catered in dinner for everybody, for the musicians, for the production team. I think some even people from like the lot, like people who are serving in the lobby or whatever would come in and eat.
Mm.
And it just built relationship over food. And this is so funny because like I think on other interviews I kind of go on this soapbox about food. I feel like churches like majorly cheap out on like green room snacks. Like they give you like those like what are those like green granola bars that are like True Valley or something they
Like
call it.
crumble everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they crumble everywhere. And that's like all there is, like crumbly like granola bars. And I'm like, one way to really up relationship and also like volunteer commitment and not burnout is to feed people.
Mm-hmm.
Like people love to eat together. They love to be together. I think it shows them that you're caring for them. But that's a
Mm-hmm.
great way to bring your worship team and your production team together.
Yes.
So it's not just the worship team back there eating, but it's like, no, we're doing this together.
Yes.
And we have a meal together. I also always told like the person who's running the lyrics, they have like the most important job in the whole room.
Yeah.
They are the worship leader. The person running the lyrics is the worship leader.
They
Because
control whether or not the congregation can
yeah,
keep. Mm-hmm.
exactly. If they don't do what their job is, then what we're doing as the worship team is just like a performance. Like
Great.
the lyric person is the person who takes the performance. We all know it's not a performance,
Mm-hmm.
and makes it congregational. And it is such an important role that I think it's just like totally ignored and last minute throw somebody in there to do it, and doesn't also cast the vision for that person of like how important of a role they have as a worship leader.
Yeah.
Okay, that was not your question, but
that was a good answer. I'm
yeah.
glad we went there.
How it's shaped what we've built.
Yeah, your philosophy of worship.
Yeah, we really want. We talked about earlier about just making churches so that they can sound like them and sound like their church. All the tools we've built, we're always going for how do we make this as easy as possible. Not to overcomplicate it, because things really start to break down when things are overcomplicated.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, we get so many emails from people who are like, I got one actually this weekend that was like, it just made me chuckle inside, because it was someone who was like, hey, have you ever thought about doing this and adding this feature and making it do this and blah, 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 like all these bells and whistles, like crazy stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we could do that. Like we could, but we're choosing not to do that. Mm-hmm. Because if we gave everybody everything they wanted in like our app, for example, it would become over complex. It would be hard to use. Yeah. It would not be volunteer friendly. When all of that stuff starts happening, guess what? The focus starts to be around that on a Sunday morning. Yes. It's not working. People are trying to figure out how to make it work. They're stressed out about why it's not working. People are focused on the app. Our goal is to make all of our products like very simple, mm-hmm. and just do what it needs to do so that you don't have to think about it. Yeah. So that, and this is the philosophy, so that you can focus on leading worship. Yes. I don't ever want a worship leader to be focusing on their laptop when they're leading worship, or on a foot controller, or something like automating some lyric and lighting thing. Like your mind should not be on that when you're leading worship. Yeah. And so the more you make something complicated and complex, the more of a risk you have for that to happen. Mm-hmm. And actually probably more likely than not, because most churches are not super tech advanced. Like from Instagram, you would think that like every church has it all together and they're tech nerds and they're amazing at technology. And most churches in the world are not that. They're the opposite of that. They are like low tech, like barely figuring it out how to like plug this into the sound system. Mm-hmm. And so those are the people that we're serving. The nerds will always figure it out. They'll always figure out some way to like have their foot controller like start a cup of coffee in the green room. But we And they can figure that out. But like when we're building our products, we want to serve churches are not super tech savvy, and they just need a tool that helps make Sunday morning go a little smoother and easier, and replaces a musician they maybe don't have.
Yeah.
And helps their worship be as impactful as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Speaking of complicated, you mentioned Ableton.
Yeah.
I know you did not invent Ableton, but I know you've done a lot of work with Ableton. What role does Ableton have, if any, in worship, in using tracks? What's your experience? What would you recommend?
With Ableton?
Yeah.
So it's so funny because I spoke at a school a couple weeks ago, and they introduced me when I walked up, and I don't know, they pulled up some bio that they found online somewhere, and it said I'm an Ableton certified trainer, but the way they pronounced it was Matt McCoy. I mean, they're not like a tech person at all. They were like, Matt McCoy is an Abletron certified trainer. And I just laughed because I'm like, it's so funny because Ableton is it does sound like it's some sort of transformer like
Totally.
thing. Abletron. I've been using Ableton Live since 2002. It was on version 2.0, I believe, at that point. And I used it very heavily for a long, long time. Ableton, like I said, was built for DJs and electronic musicians. It was not built for churches. Not that they were saying that churches can't use it, but the people who were developing that software were not thinking about churches. They weren't thinking about, oh, let's make this feature because this will make churches' lives a lot easier.
Yeah.
Instead, what happened is they built this really powerful music software, and churches and worship leaders like me were like, ooh, let me figure out how to make this like serve our needs at a church. And we geeked around, and I mean, there's so much stuff you can do. But what I found, and I was one of those geeks for a long time, was that at the end of the day, worship leaders use maybe like 10% of what Ableton Live can do.
Yeah.
It is majorly overkill for what a church and a worship team needs. Now, there are those churches that are like in the less than 1% that do need to like automate everything in the world and like sync up with like different campuses and have to have redundant rigs and like, and believe me, I say it again, that those churches are like in the less than 1%. I say that because I know that people are on Instagram and you look and you think that every church is like that. That's not the case.
Yeah.
Most are not. So there's churches like that who, yeah, Ableton's great for that. Or if you're doing some huge Easter production that needs like all this automation and whatever. But for most churches on most Sundays, Ableton's way overkill. And with overkill, you get complication. It's hard to learn. There's a learning curve. You can't just like give it to a volunteer and tell them to like build a set list and edit and create all the transitions. You can teach them that, sure. But it takes time.
Yeah.
And what I also found is that worship leaders were spending a lot of time during the week looking at Ableton Live. And I'm like, you know what? This is like not a good use of time.
Yeah.
Like if you are a worship leader employed by a church, I would hope that you're not spending the majority of your week looking at Ableton Live. Are you spending more time looking at Ableton Live than you are looking into like the face of your bass player, Stan, who's a volunteer, who's like struggling in his marriage? You know, like, I think that worship leaders should be spending more time looking into the faces of their people than into Planning Center or into Ableton Live.
Yeah.
And so with that thought in mind is what motivated me to, okay, let's take the features of Ableton Live that a worship leader needs and build them into a simple to use app that you could run on a phone or an iPad or a Mac. And so that's why we developed Loop Community Prime.
Yeah.
And it does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
You can build set lists, you can customize your tracks. Honestly, it's gotten more advanced than I even like really envisioned or wanted it to ever be. there's a lot you can do with it. There's a lot you can do. And believe me, there's so much stuff we could do that we've chosen not to do.
Yeah.
Because we want to keep it simple and easy and just give the worship leader what they need.
Yeah.
Nothing more.
Yeah. If a church has not implemented tracks in any capacity, it can feel very daunting of where do I start? What would you recommend as a first step?
Yeah, you got to start very simple. So where I would start is a couple things. We have a thing called Tracks Made Easy. If you go to tracksmadeeasy.com, we have a course that's like a really simple course you can take, and it gives you the whole overview of tracks, what they are, how to implement them into your church. I would take that course. That would be my first step. But then the second step, which is actually the second step we tell you in that Tracks Made Easy course, is to keep it very simple. Download the Prime app. So the Loop community has an app called Prime. Download that. It's completely free. All right. Download the app. And in that app, you can actually, with the free version, you can just create a set list of click tracks. If a church has never used tracks before, it's likely they also haven't played to a click before.
Right.
And playing to a click is really important with playing with a track. So the very first thing you have to learn is how to play to a click, which is really easy to do, but it just takes practice. And so get the Loop Community Prime app and you can create a set list of just click tracks. You can type in the name of the song, like How Great Is Our God, and then you just have a click track that goes. And all you do is plug that into your sound system and get your band in a rehearsal just practicing with playing to a click. Just set a tempo and get your band on a click. That's the number one thing you can do, by the way, to raise the quality of your band. Get everybody on a consistent tempo. When they're not playing to a click, some people are speeding up, some people are slowing down, things start getting like garbled. Just play to a consistent tempo.
Yeah.
And that will make a big difference. So start playing to a click. Once your band starts feeling comfortable playing with a click, then you can get a track. Like just pick any song you want on loopcommunity.com and download it and throw it into the app and just try it for a rehearsal.
Yeah.
If you get off, it's all right. Just hit the stop button and keep going. Not a big deal. But I think what ended up happening is once people like get the feel of it and they start hearing it, they're like, wow, this feels really full. They're going to want to keep doing it. Yeah. And then you can add a second song and then a third song. And you don't have to use a track for every song in your set list.
Yeah, true.
So start simple. Just one track at a time.
Yeah, that's good. For churches who are maybe writing their own original worship songs, is there a way for them to record tracks and get those into the Loop community ecosystem for other churches to use?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, are you talking about if someone's recorded their own, and released it on Spotify and Apple Music, like that kind of things, or made their own tracks?
Their own original worship song, and they multi-tracked it so they have all the stems.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, totally. All they have to, we make that process really, really simple, and all they have to do is email us at Loop Community, support at loopcommunity.com, and send us a link to the album, and we can get all those tracks up on Loop. Wow. And we also can work with them on doing, a marketing initiative like free song giveaways or artist interviews, and there's a lot of things we can do with that.
Oh, that's so cool.
So we make it really simple.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's something that, as churches write songs locally, like if other churches in the community or even like you're in the Portland area, a suburb, but even in the greater Portland, like we have a song that maybe we want to see at other churches in the Portland area, rather than just emailing an MP3 file, that would be way more comprehensive for churches to implement.
Yeah, totally. No, we'd love to get any sort of original music up.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
And there's no fee for that, by the way. Like it's just, you get it up, then there's just a revenue split. So when the track is bought by a worship leader, money gets sent to the artist or whoever owns the song and the recording. And so it's another way too for churches to make some extra money on the side as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
My last question for you, as a worship leader, but also, you are big in the tech world. What's some of your favorite gear to use, be it instrument or, tech gear? What are some of your go-tos?
Yeah. It's funny because I've never really been a big like gearhead.
Mm-hmm.
I play acoustic guitar whenever I lead worship. So like if you were to look inside of my bag that I carry when I go to like church and lead worship, it's got my acoustic guitar in it, which I've got a Collings OM3. I love it. It's great. Great acoustic guitar. I've got like a Polytune tuner. I have my iPad, which I use to run the Loop Community Prime app for the tracks. I have a Looptimus Mini, which actually I've got one right here. This little controller.
Mm-hmm.
I love this because it's like small enough to fit in a pocket.
Yeah.
But it's 3 buttons, and I plug this into my iPad. Actually, it's wireless. This particular one's not wireless, but we have a wireless one.
Mm-hmm.
And it connects to the iPad to run the tracks, and I can just press like start, stop, next.
Nice.
That's it. Or I also set up like this one where if I press and hold it and release, it repeats the section I'm currently in. So if I'm leading worship and I'm like, ooh, let's do that bridge again. I just press and hold this and release, and it will repeat that in the track. And it'll actually tell everybody in their ears, bridge 2, 3, 4. So everyone knows exactly what we're doing. So I always have this down by my feet as the worship leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a track rig in my backpack as well. And that's just like, it's the 8-channel XLR interface that also plugs into my iPad. And it's how all the tracks are sent out to the sound system.
Yeah.
But that's really like all the gear that exists in my music life, other than a piano that I have at home that I love and play every single day. So
yeah, I love it. That's great. It's a solid, easy scoop, but it gets the job done.
Very easy.
If people want to learn more about you, your ministry, resources available, trainings maybe for Loop Community, where are some great websites that they can go to check that out?
Yeah, the great way to follow just all things tracks or loops, as I like to call them. I want to bring that word back, by the way, because that was like the OG term, and I think we should bring that back. Follow us at Loop Community. Go to any social platform and just search Loop Community, and you'll find us. And follow our content there. We have a lot of really cool new YouTube videos that are coming out on our YouTube channel. And what we did is we went to a church last summer and filmed a lot of videos, training videos on stage with a band, because we wanted to show people like, okay, how does this actually work and look on a Sunday morning? If you've got a full band here and they're all waiting on you, in a sound check, how do you actually set up all the tracks? How do you customize the keys, and how do you automate the charts, and how do you automate the slides? And we talk about all of that like on a stage with a band.
Yeah.
We also do a lot of discussions with band members. Like, so what did you think about, hey, what did you think about it when I played that piano part over the piano part you were playing? Like there's a lot. So follow us on the YouTube channel. And then also I would say too, if you have not heard of Worship Innovators, worshipinnovators.com. It's a conference and an online community. So in the fall, we do a conference in Chicago. It's practical training. So this conference is for worship leaders who want to come for like 2 days of just like boot camp in a way. Come and just learn practical things, how to run tracks, how to run a better audition process, how to run an excellent sound check, how to write a chord chart, how to transpose on the fly, like all the practical things a worship leader needs.
Yeah.
We cover at this conference. And then there's also an online community where we do all sorts of fun stuff. So go to Worship Innovators. That's a great way to also just get connected with what we're doing.
Yeah, I love that. Really practical, lots of training and resourcing, and still the community aspect built into that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being with us. It's been so fun to talk to you and hear more about Loop Community and the background and your philosophy on all of it. And just really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me on as a guest. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Tides podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss any upcoming videos, resources, or events. If you'd like to support Creative Tides, including events like workshops or tools like this podcast, head to our website, creative-tides.com, to make a donation or purchase merch. Thanks so much for being a part.